I think it's important to maybe sometimes look at the way that an industry operates and think, okay, well, how, it's not necessarily revolution, but evolution.
Anything you do proactively in the legal world is generally going to be cheaper for your business than reactively. Because reactively, oftentimes you are no longer in the driving seat as to how that will work.
Why did you feel that you needed to, when you launched your own business, change the way it was done?
So you take that cash flow hit, and it's unforecasted because you weren't anticipating this cost arising. And what happens is then you've got a potentially 30,000-40,000 black hole in your cash flow.
If I'm listening to this as a business leader, it makes me rethink my own pricing model of pricing strategy, because it's mutually beneficial. Hi everybody, welcome back to episode 3 of Best in Class. I'm absolutely delighted with this week's guest, Zohaib Hashim. We had a chat a few months ago when I was kind of pitching the idea, and Zohaib kindly said he'd come on and be a guest. But I'm really excited to get into kind of some of the stuff that we initially spoke about your business. So, Zohaib, over to you. Do you want to welcome to the podcast first and foremost?
Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. So, do you, for the benefit of kind of everyone watching and listening, do you want to just give them a bit of a rundown of who you are, the business, what you do, and then what it is that the business does well?
Sure. So my name is Zohaib Hashim. I'm the CEO and founder of Blackmont Legal. We're a specialized boutique law firm headquartered in Manchester. Boutique basically means we have a very core specialization, and we don't kind of drift from that. And our specialization is in business services. So we're a corporate and commercial focused firm. Our be-all end-all is to provide legal services for businesses only. So that covers all of the host of corporate commercial requirements, dispute resolution, employment, and intellectual property. And generally speaking, we're what we would call a mission-led firm. So it's a term you hear a lot more in the greater corporate sphere, less common in law firms, because law firms typically start from the idea of a bunch of lawyers who are very good at practicing law deciding to launch their own law firm. We decided that we were going to take a mission-led focus, and the mission focus that we've got, and it is the official mission statement of the firm. It's redefining legal services for modern businesses. The idea and mantra we took was that the shape and the approach to modern business has changed, both through a combination of technology, evolving times, mass media, access to information, and modern businesses have kept up to date with those changes. The legal sector hasn't necessarily kept as up to speed with those changes. We're usually always, as an industry, a couple of steps behind, and always trying to play catch up with how our clients' expectations and needs are evolving. We decided to kind of just take a very holistic approach in providing services targeted at core customer markets as they exist now. So, what do customers of this day and age need and look for in their lawyers and legal advisors, and to kind of bridge some of that trust gap that exists. Because, when you typically think about needing a solicitor or needing a law firm or a lawyer for any purpose, one of the first associated things that people think about is the cost of the lawyer, and kind of the idea that just the act of hiring a lawyer will be quite expensive, quite daunting, quite challenging. You'll be faced with potentially very technical advice that will be very difficult to implement or follow. There's usually a kind of a gap in the lawyer's understanding of your business, and maybe even your industry as a whole. And these all become challenges that need to be surmounted quite early on. And it becomes very difficult if you're coming to a lawyer at a time in your business's life when you have a very urgent need for one. So something, catastrophic has happened, and a legal case has come through the door, someone's issued a claim against you, and you're playing against the clock because of deadlines. So it becomes very quick to then do all of that groundwork and play catch up, and get up to speed with finding a lawyer who is very suitable for that requirement. So we decided to change that quite substantially. We're very customer driven in the approach we take. Very early on, we decided we weren't going to be a budget firm. We're not the cheapest in the market, but at the same time, our focus on delivering quality does mean that very often clients will turn around to us and say, actually, we feel you are value for the money.
I think
Um,
that's for anybody when they're talking about kind of price position in the marketplace, it all comes down to that value proposition. Are the results representative of the cost? And I
yes.
think people are happy to pay a premium price or midpoint price
Mhm.
if they feel that they're going to get the level of service for
Yeah,
it.
absolutely right. And I think it's the level of service and results that are realistic and kind of pragmatic. And I think that's something we've always taken a view on, that there's no point hiding things from the client. Um, you know, our clients are business leaders. They're mature people who have been in their respective industries for a very long period of time. They understand commercial realities. So trying to string along the client with promises of, well, we could achieve this, we could achieve that, very unrealistic. I think it's very important to make sure clients understand what the pragmatic position is, and then we set what our achievement goals would look like. So we're very driven by things like SWOT analysis when we approach dispute resolution. Um, we kind of take established models and utilize them in languages that businesses already understand to express legal advice. Um, my history, so I've got more than 10 years of experience as a corporate and commercial solicitor, 13
One
years
of my
overall.
questions was, it's not a Manc accent, so
No.
obviously, how did you end up in Manchester?
So I mean, I grew up overseas. I grew up in the United States and in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia. And when it came to university, I had to choose where I was going to come for university. I was in a British school at the time in Saudi Arabia, so they were very kind of focused on driving students towards coming to the UK. The University of Manchester appealed to me. It was a kind of very international student focused at the time. I came here for law school, did my undergraduate degree here, qualified as a solicitor here, ended up meeting my wife here. And now we've got children here. So it's just one of those things. I think over time, this became home.
There's a lot of places in the world.
Yeah.
I have a real soft spot for Manchester. I lived there for many years. I find it very, very interesting. Going back to something you originally said, there's not a lot of what I feel is you're talking about a lot of innovation. You're trying to kind of raise the bar and push the way that a legal firm kind of operates, and you're explaining a lot of kind of innovative solutions and methods about how you've looked at your business model versus maybe the traditional one. I find it interesting because I've kind of done the same with my business of hire, and one of the things I'm proudest of is we were a finalist in an innovation award category, and that's not typically a category you would find a recruitment agency in. I think it's important to maybe sometimes look at the way that an industry operates and think, okay, well, how it's not necessarily revolution, but evolution. I've looked at kind of digital tools that are available to improve the process around both kind of job generate or applicant generation through to candidate submission. And it's not gimmick, it's there to add value, and the feedback that you get from your customer base kind of endorses that. And I just find it really interesting. You kind of done that. I've gone, okay, what was the driver for that? So why did you feel the need of going? You've obviously worked in the legal sector all your career. Why did you feel that you needed to, when you launched your own business, change the way it was done, so to speak?
So there's two main factors. Over the course of the last 10-ish years that I've been a solicitor, I was very involved with a couple of groups of companies up in the north of England. And very specifically, I worked with the CFO very closely. So a lot of my direct impact in working with those businesses was understanding the finance of the business. And these are multi-million pound businesses, so you really see how the flow of money goes. And in some of the businesses, you could see how the CFOs were more relaxed in terms of expense, but that would then hit the EBIT, the earnings before interest and taxation, and would result in a lower profit margin. And similarly, in firms which controlled that and maintained a higher profit margin, there was a higher percentage of cash available. And one thing we've got to realize as lawyers is, because we are a cash expense for those businesses, the hit they take on us is after deducting their cost of sale from their turnover. So it's not just looking at, okay, this is a £5 million turnover business. They can definitely afford very expensive lawyers. It's very much a case of, well, okay, do they have the cash position and the cash flow? So cash flow became king in understanding how firms view lawyers. And typically when you think about a lawyer and you need a lawyer, using our previous example of the emergency situation that's emerged, suddenly the value of that lawyer is very high in the business because they need that assistance more than what the cost of not using that lawyer would be. So you take that cash flow hit, and it's unforecasted because you weren't anticipating this cost arising. And what happens is then you've got a potentially 30,000-40,000 black hole in your cash flow that you then have to account for at the end of year, and then figure out how that will impact your future growth decisions, because at the end of the day, that's what business leaders are doing, that they're planning for their future and their growth. So we said, well, okay, what's the best way we could disrupt that element of things? The best way we could disrupt that element of things is try and smooth the cost of the lawyer for the client. Because at the end of the day, the requirement will be the requirement. They will still need a lawyer. They will still need, X number of hours to do a task. But how can we smooth that for them in a way where all of that cost isn't being borne up front? So we came up with our subscription model. The general premise behind our subscription model is that we allow clients to enter into a retainer subscription agreement. We're still an SRA regulated law firm, so if clients are buying hours from us, those hours are banked. They don't get lost, and they're always available for them. The benefit the client has is, one, they've got a lawyer that already knows their business. They don't need to worry about the mounting cost because the cost is just being banked. When they're ready to use that lawyer, all they do is pick up the phone or send us an email and they say, look, this is the situation that's happened. Can you deal with it? And we step in and work against the existing pool of hours they've already banked with us. So there's no immediate cash impact hit on the business. There's no needing to worry about, an upfront cost that they would have to pay for a new lawyer that they would have to bring on board. There's no concerns about conflict because we're already their lawyers on record. So it kind of becomes a very smooth transitional arrangement, almost viewed like insurance.
Yeah, so I love this. Like, I told you just before we started recording that yours is the case study that I've used to talk to every future kind of potential guest, of saying, we were talking about one thing and then you just dropped this very kind of off the cuff comment about your pricing model. And I was like, this is amazing. This is it. Because if I'm listening to this as a business leader, it makes me rethink my own pricing model and pricing strategy, because it's mutually beneficial. Mm-hmm. It's beneficial to the customer because, as you just said, it's kind of like having a rainy day fund, isn't it? It's, as you rightly said, you would see it as an insurance policy. You don't think, when you're forecasting for the year, you don't think, okay, June, right, we're going to need to make sure we've got a pot there because we're going to need a legal support service at that point in time. You don't know when it's going to come up. And most SME businesses, I'm one of them, do not have that contingency fund just sat there in a pot. The cash flow maybe isn't of a position that can sustain a hit like that, just
absolutely,
kind of whenever it can happen. So by spreading out that cost makes it palatable. That you've got that insurance policy should something come up. But then from your side of things, it improves your own cash flow because you've constantly got that consistency of money coming through all the time. So for me, it's absolutely genius. And I guess we started to see kind of recurring revenue subscription models coming in about probably 2010, something like that in businesses. But it's not always easy for everyone to do it. I think you're the first legal firm I've definitely heard of doing it. I guess from the other side, so if I'm a business leader, I'm listening to this and thinking, I like this. This is good stuff. I can see how if we can somehow flip our pricing structure to a recurring or subscription basis. Is it easy to get a customer on board with it? Because you are trying to say, look, you might not need this, but if you do, you're not going to be hit. So you're having to kind of convince a customer to fork out money monthly for potentially something that might never happen, um, might happen, and if it does, this is going to make life so much easier for you.
Yes.
But is it a challenge?
It's I think that the key thing to understand, and it's one of the reasons why I get along really great with other law firms, is I don't view them as competitors. And the simple reason I don't view them as competitors is the business world has an infinite number of legal requirements, right? Any individual business, there are an infinite number of things you could do in your own business that a lawyer's input would improve. The primary constraint is always budget, right? So a business thinks, right, can we afford to, buy new terms and conditions that are bespoke and built for our business? No, we can't afford that expense right now. We're still early in our life cycle. We will rely on Google or ChatGPT or whatever, free tool is available to do something that's good enough from their perspective. And then they will put it aside. And then the danger is that they'll never think about it again as a risk or vulnerability. So from our perspective, it's not making the client aware that they need our services now, immediately. A lot of it is getting into the mindset of thinking about what your business's needs actually are. And just a lot of it is just that educational drive. So getting an
I suppose
understanding.
it's a bit like I'm thinking about. I'm thinking, from my perspective, a contentious situation happens. Maybe a client doesn't pay a fee, and then I need support to kind of chase that. I think the work was done, they're disputing it, whatever it may be.
Yes.
And I'm thinking about that kind of one-off initial worst-case scenario, but I've got a misinterpretation of your business. It's broader than that, isn't it? Like, I guess it's from a consumer perspective. You think about a legal support only being on a kind of ad hoc basis when the proverbial hits the fan.
Hmm.
But actually, you offer more of a holistic approach than that. So it could be terms and conditions, it could be contracts with clients, it could be entering new markets, it could be a whole raft of
Oh
things.
yeah. And proactively, anything you do proactively in the legal world is generally going to be cheaper for your business than reactively. Because reactively, oftentimes you are no longer in the driving seat as to how that will work. And a dispute regarding a customer not paying an invoice, that's a pretty common one. Another really common one is, you've got a member of staff that isn't performing and you want to go through the dismissal process. From a
Oh, so you
business's
do that
perspective,
side of kind of the employment law side as well as kind
yeah,
of.
we only do business side employer, and kind of the understanding that employment law for businesses can be very costly without even realizing it, because from an employee perspective, especially a former employee perspective, the cost of bringing a frivolous claim is very low. The threshold is very simple, and that's by design. They're in a disadvantageous position just by virtue of being the employee. So the system is designed around making it very easy for them to bring a claim. The downside of that is it's very easy for them to bring a claim. And from a business's perspective, if you don't rigidly follow the defined processes in law with regards to dismissing an employee, or even something as simple as ensuring that you're running a blind candidate process to avoid claims of discrimination in interviews, it can become quite costly. And a lot of the times, these are not the things that you will be thinking about if you are in the mindset of we will only hire a lawyer when we have an emergency for that lawyer. But once you do get into the mindset as a business of thinking of, okay, these are the iterative things that we can be improving on in our business. Oh, look, we've got a banked amount of hours that Zohaib's team is sending us every month, and that's just going up. Well, maybe we can use some of that at that time. Maybe we can get him in to deliver a talk on proper grievance procedures to our management staff. Maybe he can talk to us about how the best process on executing contracts would be. So we go a lot wider in terms of what the business's requirement is. And I think my approach to my clients is I want them to continue to grow, and I want us to be able to grow alongside them, and it's to create that long-term relationship. I very rarely go into an interaction with a client where my view is just the current piece of work.
Yeah.
And I think that's the danger with a lot of lawyers, because they get an instruction in and they're very keen to capitalize on that instruction. They deliver what they feel is good enough. The client oftentimes they might not necessarily be happy, but the issue with arguing with your lawyer or trying to raise a complaint through the legal system is generally not worth the time. So the clients say, fine, okay, we've taken the hit this time. Next time they move to new lawyers, and that churn is very, very common. Um, I don't consider a client as our client unless they've come back to us more than once on something. Once they've come back to us for multiple things, that's when I begin to think of, yes, this is our client, because we've had that buy-in where we've demonstrated that their trust in us is worth, them continuing to come back to us.
And I guess by also through that kind of pricing model, you build that relationship, and it must be much easier for you as from a kind of consultative perspective when you know the business inside out to be able to kind of offer the best and most suitable advice to them. It's quite hard when it's kind of you hit with just limited information on a brand new client.
Correct.
You don't know too much about them. You do your best, but I imagine the level of service you're able to give is far more enhanced the more with the
Absolutely.
skin you are with it with a client, and having that pricing model, I guess, reinforces all of that as well. So it works on so many different levels, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, from my perspective, it opens the opportunity to get to know the client, but as you said, get to know the client business really in depth. We're not against the clock where, a tight dispute is concerned in getting to know the business, getting to know their practices, getting to know how they do business. Calls are more relaxed and more exploratory. And I mean, some of my subscription clients, they will just, out of the blue message me now and say, oh yeah, we were passing through here and we thought about you. And, I'll send them a friendly message back. And more often than not, they're not worried about, oh, I'm being billed for this time, because that's not the model we work on. So it allows us to develop that closer relationship. And I think really building on that trust and proving that we are worthy of that trust is one of the core focuses for us.
Do you think this is the direction that a lot of other legal firms will go? Because it sounds as though you're very much, as I say, it's not revolution, but it's evolution. It's about, okay, how can we enhance the service, make it better? Um, there probably are other law firms out there doing something similar. You'll know that
Yes.
better than I am. But do you think
Yeah.
this is the direction of travel now for the industry?
I think so. I think the traditional law. So historically, when you think of a really good law firm in the context of Britain, for example, you would think of your Magic Circle firms or your Silver Circle firms. So these are dominant London-centric firms. They've got a very established pedigree of Oxbridge educated lawyers, and they use that as a chip on their shoulder to drive their exclusivity. And consequently, the type of client they will work for will also be generally, Fortune 500 companies, AIM listed companies, very large corporations who are less worried about, shall we say, the customer centric focus that a smaller company would desire. But from their perspective, one, it's they're banking on the insurance and the name of the established firm to know that they will get a predictable result at the end of what their instruction is. And it's about that predictability for large scale businesses. But at the end of the day, the majority of the British economy is SMEs. So there's a very wide range of businesses that do care about their business being properly looked after, that do care about getting the best value for what they achieve, and oftentimes for their perspective, when they're introduced to very large firms, it's a bit of a shell shock because um, that's not what they expected from the top of the top. Um, you know, I'll give you an example. One of my clients, they worked with a very major IP company, IP law firm in the UK, very well-known firm for what they do in terms of intellectual property. For the amount of work that they had done, they were expecting a bill in the region of 10 to 20,000 pound, and they'd factored that okay, it would be 10,000 here. It's a London-centric firm. Let's double it. It'll be 20,000.
Yeah.
The bill came in at 50,000. So 5 times what they'd anticipated the value of the work was, with
And I
far
guess
more.
you can't then contest that.
They did, and it was a back and forth, and ultimately they they ended up paying a substantial amount of it because there's only so far you can get. But the value that it had created for them was still more than what the dispute
Yeah,
having gone on would
yeah.
have been. So they just bit the bullet and said, "Fine, we'll swallow the pill."
But he's
Well,
left a sour taste afterwards.
exactly, and they've not gone back to that firm, even though that firm does still carry reputation for excellence in that industry. And as a player, they've used other firms
It
for
goes back to
similar
what we
types
said
of work.
originally
Yeah,
about kind of price positioning of, well, as long as the customer sees value in the service or result or products, whatever it is that they got,
yes,
and they're happy with it, that doesn't sound as though they were happy with it, and therefore you're not gonna generate loyalty from that.
exactly right. And I think there were things that the firm could have done to improve that relationship more. I'm thinking that the cost element of it was not the be all end all of it. It was a lot of it was the way it was dealt with as well, and the relationship just didn't have a chance to survive at that
Yeah.
stage. So these are the
Strategic
things that kind of
relationships,
change.
it's the full package of a service delivery. It's not just necessarily the price at the end of it. I
Yes.
can charge a certain price, but if it's everything that goes with it, my clients appreciate, well, that's what constitutes the price, not just,
Yes.
well, hang on, you've done exactly the same as this agency over here who charge a fraction of that. Um, where's then the justification
Oh
around
yeah,
it?
absolutely.
So, look, Zahay, we've come to the end of the recording, but thank you so much for that. As with is now becoming tradition, I have a question left by the last guest. So,
Mhm.
the question I've got for you is, what is the most fun you've had at work, and why have you chosen that instance or occasion?
Um, when I was a junior lawyer, and I was in the same situation where I would only meet clients that were introduced to the firm, so I was not meeting them proactively. I would often see firms at their most vulnerable and most defensive, so some kind of major problem has happened that they need solving, and then we would work to solve that problem. Since I became the owner of my own firm and started being more proactive in meeting people more, I think some of the best experiences I've had are in meeting new businesses and just kind of listening to business leaders describe their visions and goals for their firms, what their dreams and aspirations are, and just kind of the passion they put into their own businesses. And it's very inspiring to see. And especially when they're in a more relaxed environment, you can really see that shine through. So from my perspective, I think it's the joy of kind of networking and meeting those new businesses
Yeah,
that I'm doing now. It's probably the most favorite kind of element of being my own boss, so to speak, owning my own law firm. And I think it's a value I'm trying to instill in my employees as well to get that appreciation early on to understand what clients are passionate about because if they're passionate about something, they would want you to, give it the same level of respect and appreciation.
yeah. I can fully get on board with that because from my job, you go when you're kind of client facing and you engage with other businesses, you get to just learn the landscape of businesses out there, and then you have the conversations. You understand what it is that they do,
Mm.
um, and you can get really excited about it. Yeah, I'm fully on board with that because I'm exactly the same, and that's the whole point of this podcast. Really, is to share
Yeah.
all these stories of these amazing businesses, and yours is absolutely one. I love so many aspects. I mean, there's so much we haven't even uncovered today about your business, but even just the mechanics around or the change in the pricing strategy, but all the levels of why that works so well for both sides as well. Zahay, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.